Hey, it's Sloth here. I'll get the kettle brewing while we get caught up. As some of you might already know, I recently had to take a brief hiatus while working on my portfolio to apply to university. I actually haven't posted most of what's in it yet, because I was scared to jinx it before I got a confirmed definitive place somewhere. I've also heard that if your art gets stolen and there's any debate about who owns it, that your university will just reject your portfolio outright, so just wanted to completely avoid that possibility. As of right now, I've only posted quick peeks at some of the pieces that are in my portfolio in my art cheats video, but I had a price confirmed by then, so I felt pretty safe about it. But now that I've officially started my course, I'm super excited to give you guys the full tour. I used to watch a ton of portfolio tours when I was in school to see what I'd need to put in mine, so I'm going to assume that's the majority of you guys watching too. So I'm going to do my best to provide all the context and be as helpful as possible, and add in some advice where I can. Okay, so context. First things first, I'm British and I only apply to universities within Britain. I'm not sure if different countries have different standards or things that they look for within a portfolio. I kind of assume that they do, but just a thing to double check if you're using this video as any kind of guide. I've seen a lot of people say what schools they applied to, and as much as it might be helpful for people looking to get into the same universities to see examples of accepted work, I also have no interest in doxing myself, so I will not be doing that. Also, I only applied to courses with an integrated foundation year. For my non-British viewers, foundation years are an extra year of study at the start of your course, which works on building basic skills and academic knowledge and have a lower barrier of entry. There were a couple reasons why I chose to do a foundation year. The main one is just that I've been out of education for a couple years, so I wanted to ease my way back into it. The other big context here is that this isn't going to be a super polished portfolio that I collected over a year or so. I had a bunch of personal life stuff which ended up getting resolved very suddenly, so I only had about 4 months or so to prepare my portfolio, since I didn't know I'd be able to apply to uni this year at all until then. So I'll be the first to admit there was definitely some parts that are rushed and I wish I had more time on. That being said, I did get an offer for all 5 universities I applied to, including 2 unconditional offers, so hopefully this is still kind of like a useful guide. So, with our context out of the way, let's get into the tour! Okay, so my first big tip, and honestly the biggest one, just check what the universities you're applying to ask for. I can guarantee that they will have a list of what they want or guidance somewhere on their site or course page. It's always best to tailor your portfolio to the schools you're applying to. Your portfolio is more or less going to be split into 2 major sections, which is technical studies to demonstrate your skill and understanding of artistic principles, and your personal art section to show your passion and potential. In this case, we also have a section for animation, which is a little of both. Remember, universities don't need you to have a perfect portfolio or be the best artist in the world. Their job is to teach you. What they're really looking for is that you're passionate about what you do, how you think and your process, and your potential which they can foster. I'm going to be starting out by showing my technical studies. I put these first in my portfolio, so that I could lead with my knowledge and understanding, so they knew I had a good understanding of the basics right off the bat. So, starting off, we have a collection of timed life drawings. These ones took 2 minutes each, this one took 5 minutes, and this one took 15. I've mentioned in other videos that I like to do timed life drawings for warm-ups, and that I've been doing them pretty consistently since December. So this section was just a matter of keeping up with that practice and picking out my favourites. I ended up doing way more life drawings than usual though, and ended up basically filling up this entire sketchbook with them. I would do a quick flip through, but it sounds really hard to edit all of that censoring in post, so I'm just gonna show you a few of my other favourites instead. Unfortunately, YouTube would strike me down like a wrathful god if I showed the unedited versions. As you'll have guessed by now, I did a fair bit of what I'm going to be calling auxiliary work, which is stuff that didn't make it into the final portfolio, but I either did for practice prep, or I made with the intention of putting it in my portfolio but it got cut. Universities generally only allow around 20 pieces and a maximum of 2 minutes animation reel, so you have to be careful to pick your best stuff. But I think a lot of this cut work is an interesting peek behind the curtain, so I'm going to show a lot of it, but I'll make clear what's actually in the final portfolio that got sent. These life drawings are obviously to show an understanding of anatomy, which is vitally important for animation. But basically every art course will ask you for life drawings, so an absolute must for all you artists watching. I like to do these with pens so that I physically can't get perfectionist about them. Once a line is there, it's there. I do attend life drawing classes in person. The 15-minute one is from an in-person class, but most of these are from Line of Action, which is a website that has a bunch of art references that will time for you. Super helpful, definitely recommend. I made sure to include both male and female bodies to show that I can draw both. I included a clothes model as well to show that I can draw cloth physics, and because I really liked how the hatching came out in this piece. Not that you can tell I got super enamoured with drawing their trousers or anything though. I also wanted to make sure that I was drawing women here, since most of the women in my passion section are either girls or more muscular, so I just wanted to make sure to show that I can also draw less buff adult women as well. The more types of people you can draw, the better. My next piece is also a life drawing, though this one is not timed. It's a gouache painting to show that I can work in traditional mediums, and it dips a little into the passion section too, since gouache is probably my favourite traditional medium. It's like if watercolour was actually fun. When I was doing my A-levels, my teacher told me I had a good subtlety in my colours when painting, so I wanted to play into that strength. Which brings us into our next tip. Don't just copy what everyone else is putting into their portfolio. Absolutely follow the guidelines your course is asking for, but don't be afraid to twist it into showing off what you enjoy doing and the things you've been complimented on. Play into your strengths. Our next studies are these hands and feet, which I did in biro. Once again, showing off anatomy and form. I've heard that you should put hands in your animation portfolio, since they're such a big part of emoting in animation and character work. And the feet felt like a good flex, since they're so difficult to draw. On to our last anatomy study. We have this page of timed faces. These all took 3 minutes each and were done with a coloured pencil, just to help it look more interesting than another page of black and white studies. I used Line of Action in for this again because they have a faces section. I swear I'm not sponsored, I just legitimately use this site a lot for studies. It will be coming up again in this video. I'll leave a link to it in the description for y'all to check out too. I didn't want to just reference off of Pinterest for these like I did for my hands and feet, because I wanted to show I could draw all kinds of different faces and a standard person. Pinterest has a lot of very beautiful faces that can be fun to draw, but they don't tend to be as diverse in features as real people's faces. This is another work I had auxiliary stuff for. I made a couple of pages of faces so that I could choose my favourite. These are the other ones that got cut. They have faces I also really like, but I also have a couple of weaker ones on them too, so I wanted to include my most consistently strong studies. I do wish the one I had included had more different angles and expressions like the other pages did, but like I said, I was kind of short for time, and I knew I'd be able to make up for it in the passion section later. This is more to show an understanding of the structure of a face and the ability to draw different features in people. Now, onto our environmental studies. We have our first digital art piece, which is what will be making up the bulk of the rest of my portfolio, since it's my preferred medium and what most animation work is in. It is important that you show that you can work traditionally, so make sure to include that in your portfolio. Personally, I like to do my studies traditionally anyway, so it's also a good display of my usual work process, which they are absolutely looking for, keep that in mind. Anyways, our landscape. I started this way back in February of 2023, got about halfway through and then forgot about it. So I just polished what was there and finished it, rather than starting a whole new painting. Once again, I was working on a time limit. If I could cut down a couple days of work, I was absolutely going to. I really love impressionistic paintings, so that was the style I was going for. I think the background looks kind of rushed. I do wish I'd had more time to polish that up, but I really like the tree in the foreground. It might be doing a fair bit of heavy lifting, but I think it's doing it well. As much as pretty much everyone hates doing them, environmental studies are an absolute must for a portfolio. Perspective is an important thing to show that you understand. Also, at least some students are probably leaving them out since they're so hated, which means including them at all might help you stand out. The last piece of our technical studies section is another environmental study. These two are timed and took 10 minutes each, and you guessed it, I used Line of Action for the references. Seriously guys, Line of Action comes so in clutch for references when doing technical studies. I've been working on filling this sketchbook with 10-minute environments. I started in May for portfolio work, but now it's just something I'm steadily working on. I really want to improve my environments and perspective. I'm getting kind of sick of drawing characters on floating block colours. I want to be able to draw the settings for my stories. Once again, I chose the strongest ones for my portfolio. I'm actually enjoying doing these, and it's been upping my confidence a lot. So I would highly recommend doing 10-minute studies if you're also trying to improve your environments. It makes it a lot less intimidating than spending hours and hours drawing one building. You can mess up and move on in 10 minutes. And that's all of my technical studies. So let's move on to what you're all really here for, the passion and personal work section. Your personal work section should be the majority of your portfolio, about 2/3 if possible. This section should show off your passion, what you'd be drawing even if no one else is watching and it wasn't for a portfolio. It should also show off your work process and how you think. Universities want to get to know you a bit better. This section will also display your art style and interests. I will say immediate thing you need to keep in mind when building up your portfolio work: most universities do not accept fan art as part of a portfolio. They want to see what you're passionate about, but they also want to see your own voice and not a drawing of Batman in your style. I think this can be a pretty big hurdle. I think it's pretty common for artists to draw a ton of fan art. I certainly do, and most of my recent work is fan art, so I had to draw my characters way more than I usually do making my portfolio. But part of the reason they ask this is 1, they want to see as full a display of your ability as possible, and that includes character design, and 2, the admissions person reviewing your portfolio might not be in your fandom or recognise it, and might misattribute the character design to you. A lot of universities just outright reject fan art, so make sure you've got a good stock of art of your own OCs. Our first piece of my passion section is also dipping into technical work a little bit. It's this illustration of 2 of my characters in their office. I wanted to show that I could place characters in a space and illustrate a scene of characters interacting. If you've watched my art sheets video, you'll have seen a little bit of this before, because I used one of the methods mentioned in that video to create it. If you've been around here for a while, you'll know I absolutely love making historically based and inspired fantasy settings and character designs. These characters are no exception. Their story is set in 1895. The woman in the back is a detective, and the man in the foreground is her criminal consultant, so I wanted the piece to feel moody and noirish to give the impression they'd been working throughout the night. So we have some very exaggerated dramatic lighting, and I did a bunch of colour tests before choosing my favourite to make sure I got the mood right. This is one of my 2 big illustration pieces I have in my portfolio, so I wanted to make sure it was a really strong piece. I gave myself a lot more time to complete this than a lot of my other pieces. I think this turned out to be one of my favourite pieces that ended up in here, and it's made me want to do more illustrations with fuller environments. Next up we have some expression sheets. I have 2 of these, but we'll start out by talking about this one of Valerian, who was the criminal in the previous piece. Obviously the main point of these is to display the ability to draw different expressions and faces at different angles. But I also wanted to show that I could display character and personality, which is why I picked out Valerian for this. The vibe for him is cocky, queer-coded villain, and he's a performer and a drag king, so he's got some very distinct and strong facial expressions because he's so dramatic, compared to someone like the detective who's more stoic. I also just really like drawing his facial expressions a lot. The aim is to make him as punchable as possible. I think the top row number 3 looks a little bit like a thumb, but I couldn't work out how to fix it, and people do kind of look like thumbs when looking up, so I'll live with it. And I think the bottom last is my favourite. It's such a good little angry pout. For my artists who want to improve facial expressions, don't be afraid to make the face wrinkle and look ugly sometimes. Skin moves and it gathers and stretches, and that's what makes an expression seem convincing or large. Get references of the expression you're going for and see where that skin is wrinkling. Really gross way of thinking about it, but it does help me. Think of the skin on the face as more like the physics of a really thick cloth. The skin on your face isn't actually attached to most of your face, it's attached around it, which is part of the reason why it moves so much when you express. Here's like an example of how that would work. Imagine the ends of their mouth like putting your finger in a quilt and moving it. The quilt is going to gather in the direction you move it to, and stretch in the direction you're pulling from. Sorry if that's a really visceral image, but I hope it helps. Getting away from skin quilts, we have another expression sheet, but this one of a character who wears a mask. This is another character from that 1895 fantasy detective story. His name is Darren. The lore here is that they worship a god of knowledge who appears as a barn owl and a garden spider. They're basically like a nun dedicated to this god, and devout followers believe in being judged solely on their intelligence and not on appearances, so they always wear masks. These masks are meant to invoke the image of the god of knowledge, so they're fashioned to look like owls. I wanted to include Darren's facial expressions because I tend to really exaggerate his eyes and eyebrows in a way I don't for other characters. That's just to make up for the fact that he doesn't have a visible mouth to express with, and he's not really supposed to feel creepy or ominous, so him being expressive and not just a blank mask is really important. I wanted to just show that I could draw some expressions on a character with limited features, and I think Darren has a fun design with some strong shapes, so I knew I wanted to include him. The next piece in my portfolio is a storyboard. The version I included is actually 4 separate pages I pasted together, so the full scene could be seen without taking up all of my 20-piece limit, but I'll show them page by page here so that they're easier to view. Storyboards are a big thing to include in any animation portfolio. Your university wants to see that you can tell a story through your art and plot scenes. This one is from a scene from my middle grade urban fantasy story. It's still fairly new, so I still need to work out a lot of the major stuff for it, but this is one of those scenes I've had planned really early in development. I knew it'd be short enough to include the whole thing, which is why I chose it. Also, it's a different vibe than my moodier historical stuff, so I wanted to include something a little different than that. I will not lie though, this is a hell of a lot more polished looking than any of my usual storyboards, which are mostly stick figures drawn so messily no one but me can decipher what they mean. Speaking of, our next piece is also to show off storytelling ability, which is this comic page. This is a snippet from a mini 8-page comic I was working on for fun, which I'll post when it's done. It's just a little backstory of how the protagonists of my Regency fantasy pirate story, say that 10 times as fast, met when they were kids. Since this, I have changed the girl's face to be a little less generic and boring, but this version gets the job done well enough, and remember, we are on a time limit here. If you guys want a sneak peek behind the curtain on my work process, the absolute insane thing I do is turn my comic scripts into storyboards first, and then I copy and paste those sketches to plan out panel formatting. I just find it helps me work out the pace of a scene a lot better, and what key poses I want to include without having to work out paneling at the same time. This is what I mean by when I say my storyboards aren't nearly as nice looking in reality as the polished one I included. Next piece is another absolute must-have for any animation portfolio, which is a turnaround sheet. This one is of Darren. Like I said before, I think he has a strong design and interesting shapes, so I knew I wanted to include him. You can look at him and immediately understand his deal, so I'm pretty happy with his design. It also doubled as an excuse for me to work out some of the specifics of his design too, including his colour palette. Somehow I've avoided ever drawing this guy in colour. I did realise once it was done and I was uploading pieces onto my portfolio website that I'd put his crutch in the wrong hand, and it was far too late to fix that without redrawing the entire thing, so I just put a note up top that it was incorrect. Both so I'd remember when I reference this sheet later, and because universities don't really care if you make small errors like that, it helps them see your work process a bit, and mistakes are human. At least that's what I'll be telling myself. I can do a video in the future explaining how to make a turnaround sheet if that's something you'd be interested in. I also put his height up in the corner just so that I could find it easily when I'm drawing him next to other characters. I might end up tweaking it though, depending on how he looks next to the other characters and what that looks in scene blocking. Moving on. This is the piece I was most hesitant about including. It's one I started just for fun, so it displays my passion and what I like drawing really well, but it definitely suffers the worst from being rushed. I wish I'd had more time to draw background details, draw his familiar with better animal anatomy after studying it a bit more, and fix this last pose, which is just way too stiff and has really odd lighting. But I did end up including it in the end because it's a really good display of the kind of stuff I tend to draw for fun, and I wanted to show a breakdown of character design and that I can draw the same character consistently. I also like a couple of these poses a lot, not all of them, you know. This is the morning routine of the protagonist of my pirate story. His name's Max, you saw baby him a second ago on the comic page, and also his familiar Argus. I also wanted to include on this one what my standard shading style looks like outside of large pieces, since a lot of my work in this section is flat colour. Still though, it does remain my least favourite piece and I might tweak it a bit before posting it to my socials. All of my universities said that they don't want a perfect portfolio, and they like seeing mistakes, so I took the risk of including it, but yeah, this is definitely the one I felt the most nervous about having in my portfolio. I just wish I'd had an extra day or two to be able to work on it and really get it where I wanted, but alas. I know I could have waited until next year to apply. and really polish up my portfolio, but if I'm being totally honest, I just wanted to get back into education, so I thought it was worth shooting my shot this year and reapplying next year if it didn't work out. Up next, we have some sketches. One of the big things all of the university's portfolio guidances kept bringing up was wanting to see sketches, works in progress, and incomplete pieces, as well as things with notes on it. They want to see your process and how you think. It's a big part of them assessing your potential. So absolutely include stuff that's not finished or polished up as well. Our first sketch is this scene from the Odyssey. Yes, if you're wondering, Epic the Musical has done irreparable damage on reigniting my mythology special interest. And I did read the whole Odyssey, and by multiple translations. Thanks for asking. This is another thing I just started for fun, so felt worth including to show what I like drawing. This scene just made me so emotional when I read it, so I absolutely had to redraw it. I based my Odysseus off of Wolfie the Witches, because I haven't figured out just yet how I want to draw him. Whenever I get around to doing Epic fan art, I'll base him off of Jorge, of course, but this drawing is Odyssey Odysseus, and I want to draw them differently so you can tell them apart. You know, I really wish I had another way of transitioning than saying next piece, but I'm running out of synonyms here, so you'll have to deal with repeat phrases, I'm afraid. Our next sketch page is a big one. It's a bunch of sketches in flat colours working out the designs of the protagonist of my middle grade story. Primarily me working out the design of the protagonist, Ethan True, who's the boy with the braids. I'm still working out his outfit, I haven't really got one I like yet. These are actually a bunch of sketches I did on separate pages months ago and just pasted together for my portfolio. I polished up the anatomy on a couple of them since they were from a while ago, but mostly they're the same. I wanted to show the process of me working on a character design, and all my universities said that they want to see me work with notes, so I made sure to include lots of them. It felt a little odd, but I made sure to keep them as casual and non-academic as I write them, and just exactly what I would normally say on my notes. Admissions people want to see how you think and problem solve, and pretending to be more professional won't help them with that. I included a really messy quick sketch in the corner too, which felt weird putting in, since it's so messy, but it shows off what my quick sketches actually look like and how I break down bodies to sketch. I put in an additional sketch that I just coloured over digitally too, since I actually design a lot of my characters traditionally, especially for this story, once again just trying to show off the average process for my pieces. You guys can pause to read my notes if you want, but they're not that interesting. Then on our last page we have Valerian and the detective again. Her actual name is Cordelia, but it's probably easier to call her the detective to keep track of for you guys. Not that they're some of my favourite OCs or anything. One of the universities had an example page of accepted portfolio work up on their site, which had a couple of examples of sketches next to the photo they'd referenced. So it was clearly something they were looking for and seemed pretty easy to include. I doubled up on its purpose to also show that I can draw muscles by including a couple sketches I'd done a while ago working out Valerian's body type. I didn't polish up on this sketch of the detective jumping because once again I wanted to show what my messier stuff looks like and how I break down bodies, but I wish I'd included a third drawing of her which was more polished. Our last static image that's officially in my portfolio is this poster style illustration for my fantasy pirate story. This is to demonstrate my illustrating abilities and composition and all that good stuff. I did a bunch of thumbnails working out what I wanted to do for this before deciding on this composition, but I might draw some of these others later because I like a few of these. I did a ton of colour tests for these and I found it really hard to pick my favourite. Since it's supposed to be a poster, I wanted something that would stand out and catch the eye, but get across the mood of the story as well. That second bit was what made it difficult. Max is very happy-go-lucky and mischievous, and as the protagonist affects the tone most, since we see it through his eyes. But Connie, the antagonist and the character in the background, is hella emo, and his part of the story and what he gets up to is much darker. So I wanted to make sure both tones got across to properly convey both characters in the story. I also wanted the poses and composition to sum up the characters well, so Max is excitedly looking to adventure, and Connie is ominously brooding but not actually acknowledging Max, which felt important. Connie is up to his own goals and sees Max as an obstacle but not a nemesis, so I didn't want him to loom over him too much. He's not that invested in this guy, you know? And it's a poster, so you know I had to include a cheesy tagline. This is another one of my favourite pieces from my portfolio. Mostly I just really like how Max's hair came out in the shading. I think the blondish highlights help him look more realistically ginger than having block orange hair. I just think it's a really cool poster. Maybe I'll do a quick explaining illustrations on this at some point, we'll see. If I do, I might explain the process behind the illustration of the detective's office too. I don't think they necessarily need separate videos, but both have a couple more details than what I've mentioned. Now, as I've mentioned before, that was my last official static image in my portfolio, and that's because by this point I'd reached my 20-piece maximum limit, but I did include another drawing decoratively. I put this flat piece I did of Valerian a while ago next to my contact details on the site for visual interest. I already posted it ages ago, but I still like it, and I didn't want a blank section of nothing, so I used it to fill the page. I also put my profile picture in the About Me section too. And with that, we only have our animation reel to go. I'll be the first to admit I don't practice animating really as much as I should, so some of them are a bit rough. Currently the thing I want to go into is character design, but I'm open to discovering something I like more. I did really enjoy working on all of these. All of my universities specifically asked for a basic walk cycle and some works in progress, so those are things I made sure to include. First off, we have this run cycle I started in 2023, got halfway through sketching the details of, and then forgot about. I polished up the anatomy a little bit and then finished it off to save time on redrawing a whole new cycle. This is such an old piece in fact that the character in it is no longer in the current version of this story. She was part of that detective one, but it is my favourite of the animations. I think it flows pretty well and I'm pretty proud of how the clothes and hair move. It's not perfect, but I like it. Next up we have another one I sketched years ago and then revamped and finished with this Valerian animation. I'm not too keen on his hair here and I think it's kinda wonky, but it shows off the kind of stuff I do for fun, and I didn't have time to shade any of these, so all of them are flats. Next up, we have a work in progress of Ethan summoning his hammer. It shows off what my rough drafts look like in the beginning stages of my animations. Pretty boring one next, with the animated version of the turnaround sheet we saw before. This just shows that I drew the character pretty consistently, which is something art schools look for. Then we've got another Darren animation. This one is what my stuff looks like before I line it. I like to make different features and clothes different colours so that they're easier to track the movement of when sketching and tell apart. There's something really weird happening with the hand that's holding the lantern, but I didn't have time to fix it, and it's something I would usually fix in line art anyway, so I kept it in for the sake of accurately showing my process. We've got a rotoscope study I started a couple months ago for fun and as practice. I just finished this up for my portfolio. I thought it might be an interesting thing to include. It's rotoscoped from this YouTube video called How to Put on a Jacket Properly. Yep, there's a wrong way to do it. I have a bunch of OCs who wear jackets, so I wanted to practice how putting them on works. And last but not least, our final piece is a simple walk cycle of Connie facing the camera. Looking at it now, I definitely paced this a little too quickly. I needed a character who didn't wear heels, a skirt that obscures their legs, or a crutch that would complicate it for me, so Connie seemed like a good candidate. And his incredibly emo design is also pretty fun. And with that, we're through my whole portfolio. I hope this was interesting and helpful for those of you who are thinking of making your own portfolio. Good luck to any of you applying soon. I would recommend definitely having some extra months to prepare if you can. This was definitely way more stressful than it needed to be because of the tight time constraint. For the viewers who are in secondary school and a while off of having to make your own portfolio, I know you're watching, I used to obsessively watch portfolio tours in school too. You don't have to stress about this stuff too much yet, you've got years to prepare and build up your skills, and honestly unis don't want it to be perfect anyway. Though, if you know art school is something you want to do, it might be an idea to start doing some of the technical exercises I've discussed in this video, so you know you'll be confident in them by the time applications roll around and you don't need to cram learning how to do any of it. Uni's really exciting. I'm hoping I'll be able to keep up with my regular monthly uploads, but I may fall behind sometimes when I have a lot of schoolwork, so bear with me. Anyway, if you liked this video but don't want to rely on the homepage suggesting my stuff again, maybe subscribe and check out my other videos. It's been nice having you around. I hope you drop by again.